Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on yet another conversation with. Obviously, the goal is to find inspirational stories that will help you navigate this craziness that you're going through in personal and business as we turn into yet another week of unknowns. That cases seem to be climbing downward. Challenge spot is downward is still significant. We're still at all-time high cases. So as we continue to try to give you guidance on how to navigate your business and start planning for recovery, we have another guest joining us. Melinda, thank you for spending some time with us this morning.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we'd love for you to just kick it off with, how are you doing? What's your mindset like right now? What strategies are you implementing yourself in your business? Just some general thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, most of my client work is done either over Zoom or FaceTime or Skype. So my personal business isn't affected that much. And then on top of it, my book is being released tomorrow. And so that has created some challenges because all the bookstores are closed. So there's no opportunity to actually go and promote the book in a bookstore, which is not what I had planned. But, you have to take these things and figure out, well, what can I do instead of that? But first, before I get into really me, my heart breaks for anybody that's been affected by this. And 99% of us have been, either by knowing somebody, by actually experiencing it, or by having a ramification of it. And so I look at the things that I can do to help people at this time navigate this period and also start to think about, well, how do I move forward from this? And so that's kind of my little contribution back to the world in this, in this very challenging time.
Melinda, I think that's a great way of phrasing how to move forward. And I know you're focused on personal next and taking high level performers and helping them transition from high level accomplishment to what you refer to as the new challenge. So how do you reverse engineer that? Brands, businesses that may have been experiencing in their world, their accomplishments, now getting knocked down. How do we go from where we are today to knowing there's the next challenge and really positioning for it?
Well, the first thing is you have to bring awareness to what the issues really are. And you can't fix anything without that awareness. So one of the strategies that I have is actually having individuals write down real facts versus not quite so real facts. And so you take a piece of paper and you draw a line down the middle. And on one side of it are the real facts. So an example of that could be your business balance sheet. And you can pull up the numbers and say, okay, where is it? Am I really at? The other side of that sheet, the not quite so real facts, is that thought that's going through your head that says, I might lose everything right now, or I'm going to lose everything, or I'm a failure. And so, we have to deal with these thoughts that are happening as we're going through and looking at what is real and what isn't real. And, to extend that exercise, what I would say is then take those not quite so true facts and divide them into two more columns: true with evidence and not quite true, to show you that there are things that we think and say about our situation right now that might not quite be true, that are influencing the decisions we take and move forward.
Is that challenging to accomplish when you're getting hit from different areas? I mean, obviously it's a great philosophy, but I think there are business owners that are trying to put it into buckets. You have health damage that is happening, you have financial damage, you have panic damage and stress damage, and you have political damage that seems to be hitting us from all areas. We're boxed into the corner that we're probably living, business owners are probably living in a lot of fakes right now, and part of that is probably fright, and that they're afraid and they're scared of what's going to happen next. But how would you advise when your mindset is already in a damaged state because of what's going on? How do you get back to the starting line and say, let me really have a clear mind to try to figure this thing out?
So there are some tricks that you can do. But the first thing is that, if you're having anxiety, you have to understand what the root of that anxiety is. So just a simple example, if you're going to the fridge and eating more than you normally do, when you open up that fridge door to pull out the ice cream, you need to stop and say, why am I eating this ice cream? What's the anxiety about? Because you can't, until you can get to that root cause in each of those verticals that you talked about. And the anxiety and then the loneliness around that anxiety is so great right now that we need to be able to pause and say, what is that anxiety coming from? The second thing that people don't realize is that in deep breathing, if you're doing some deep breathing, breathe out longer than you breathe in. Because what does that do? That tells our brain that we're actually in control. So fear is driven by, when you have fear, it creates what they call an amygdala hijack. And this amygdala hijack is when, back in the Ice Age or in, long time ago, it was the saber-toothed tiger coming at us. And we had to either kill the tiger, run from the tiger, or freeze from the tiger. And usually if you froze, you were dead. And so we developed this natural response to fear. And what people have learned in neuroscience is that fear happens whether it's real coming at you like the tiger, or it's imaginary, such as bullying, or the fear of losing a business, or the fear of what's going to happen to my family, or the fear of I might be alone. So we need to understand that fear and say, well, what is it that I can do about that fear? And that goes back to, again, trying to figure out, how can I feel in control again? So I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
So I think being, trying to figure out what it is in your day you can have control over is a really important aspect of coping right now. And so, and I'm telling this to the athletes that I'm working with right now, and on some of the web platforms that I'm giving my services to, that it's really important that you figure out what you can control. Because if you don't feel like you're in any control, then that fear button is going to hit, and you're going to get tackled by that tiger, imaginary or real.
Linda, that's interesting. And then my question is this, and I mean, does this mean at a certain point we just, and I don't mean this in a defeatist way, because everything you're saying makes sense. I think for the past 3 weeks, I know myself for my own law firm, a lot of our clients, it's been continuously in battle mode, right? And we're fighting and we're doing the things, whether team meetings and organizing, supporting clients. But, Annie Duke, you shared a similar sentiment, which is that times like this really lift up the curtain and let us know that we're in less control than we normally think we are. And that's a sentiment you're sharing. Do we have to just acknowledge that fear of losing businesses or the fear of not rebounding? And do we just have to resolve ourselves to, well, it just may happen and that's it? Because I feel like I'm fighting with this fear and I'm not going to win.
So no, actually, I disagree with that. So
okay.
I actually think that, a high performer has attributes inside them that they can use to move forward. And, there is a recognition that there are some businesses that are going to have to restructure in some ways. there are things that aren't going to end up pretty, but those that know how to achieve will figure out how to achieve again. They just need to use what in the athlete world, I call it their athlete DNA. So a good athlete DNA, and this applies to high performers, is handling pressure. If you go back into the past 15 years and you think, what are the 10 situations that I've been able to deal with pressure and I've survived? It hasn't always been pretty, but I've survived. And once you start documenting that you can deal with pressure, then you can start realizing you will be able to deal with pressure going forward. So it's almost like you have to psych yourself up to having these attributes, this athlete DNA or this high performance DNA inside you, and that you're able to use that when times are tough. And you've used it in the past when times are tough. So I'm a big cheerleader of thinking about what are those things that you have, that you've used, and how can you use that going forward?
Melinda, I think a lot about athletes, and I've always used that like as a baseline to try to figure out how do you navigate business? How would an athlete deal with this? And so for an Olympic athlete, or say someone who's on the edge of being an Olympic athlete, they work their entire lives up to that point to make the Olympics and then don't. So you don't qualify, you finish 1 inch away from it. That now, like the bottom, when you've decided that you're done competing for it, or a college athlete that has dreams of being a professional athlete, goes all through college, doesn't get drafted, doesn't get signed, their careers have now hit this bottom. So they hit this bottom, and they already have the mindset, the competitive mindset, that they're going to find a way to succeed in something, but maybe not all the time do they recognize it right away. Sometimes they have to battle through a depression or a down moment, but eventually they find their way to recovery, because that's just how their competitive spirit behaves. But a lot of businesses probably just went through the exact same thing, that work, get to this point of almost making the Olympics, and the rug just got pulled out and they fell down to the bottom, and now they're trying to discover that mindset. Can you give some advice, like after that final moment in a career, whether you've made it or you haven't, how do you now get that energy to go back and compete at a all-star level?
Yeah, and I can relate to this experience on a couple of personal stories. In 1982, I had put all the work in. I was competing to make a spot on our national team, and I missed by 2/100ths of a second. And it was very devastating to me. The competition was in Australia, and I really, really, really wanted to go to Australia. That was the big goal, to get to go to Australia. Not so much competing. It was really about going to Australia. And so, I had to sit back and I had to realign my priorities and say, what is it that I really want out of swimming? And how am I going to go about getting that? And, it's these times where I call them gut checks. If you can survive, you're in a gut check right now. You're in that point of deep thought on, how am I going to survive? What do I want? What do I have to change? What do I need to have? Who can support me? All of these questions to try and get you thinking forward instead of worrying about what's in the past. And for me, I drove from Edmonton, Alberta back to where I lived at the time in London, Ontario. And I almost quit 4 or 5 times on that 28-hour straight drive. And by the time I got home, I knew what I had to do to move forward. So you do need to step back and have that gut check and really ask yourself some tough questions in that period. But if you really, really want to keep going, then you have to figure out how you're going to shift. And there's lots of different ways to shift. But you need to figure out and accept that you're going to have to change some things. What worked for you in the past might not work going forward.
Melinda, when you had that gut check with yourself, what did you decide when you went through that analysis after you didn't make it to Australia?
So I decided to keep going. So I went back to the University of Michigan, and, really dug in and said, okay, what are the things I need to change here? So one of the things I need to change was my why. Instead of wanting to be part of a team, I had to go to, I want to win. And that was a big change for me. I mean, I love the social aspect of being on a team. I liked winning too, but I really had to shift that perspective and say, I really, really want to win. That's my number one thing. What are the things I need to change to make sure that I can put myself in the game to win? And, that's what carried me to qualifying for the '84 Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the mindset that I put myself into, because just like everybody else, our business is taking a few steps backwards, and we're in uncharted territory, so we don't know what happens next. But all right, so our business took a few steps back. We were on the cusp of continuing our climb to greatness. But I've changed my mindset, because when I hit this milestone financially as a business on the climb up, it felt really good.
Right.
So it's really, like, when you put things in perspective, when you were on the climb to even making it to Australia, it's a pretty big deal to make it to Australia. It gets put in perspective very fast when it's like, you don't make it, or you just missed it. But now you get back into that mindset, and if you pause for a second and say, well, I did make progress, and I have made progress, and I'll continue to make progress. Okay, it felt, I've told restaurant brands, remember that time that you got that first dollar bill and you framed it and you put it on the wall? Like, go get that again. Like, go get your first dollar. Go win your first race. Go try to find that, because no matter what, as long as the human race exists and we find a way to survive, we're going to find small victories. Right. I think now comes time to, how do we start recognizing those a little bit more and understand that we're on a new climb or a new journey if we want to. Some people might say, I'm done with the hustle. Like, that was a good run, and on to the next thing, which is going to happen, especially with as high of unemployment as we have. But it's interesting, because, like, the reality is where you got to in Australia was a position that thousands and thousands of human beings were jealous that you got to.
Right. And, so here's the thing that, lots of thoughts are floating through my head as you were talking there. But sometimes out of our failures, not sometimes, most of the time out of our failures, we learn more than the successes that we have. And a good example is when you are an athlete, if you watch football, and you see them score, you see the running back score the touchdown, and then they all jump up and they high five and body slam each other, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody's saying to them, well, what could you have done better in that moment? It's about celebration when you have wins. And yet, if they miss the catch, then all they can think about is, how could have I done that? What could I do better? And so our wins are exceptionally important. And that's another topic I'd like to talk about in a minute. But our failures are what drive us to really learn. And so we need to recognize in this time that the things that we're experiencing will drive us to be better, if that's the path you choose. And, I think your audience wants to find that path. And so, think about what your lessons that you're learning out of this, and don't be afraid to talk to other people. One of the blind spots of a high performer is that, they're so used to having all the answers. They're so used to being the person that people go to get answers. And they have an ego that they have all the answers. And what I would say to them is, get rid of that ego and start talking to those people that are your secure base, because you need to bounce ideas off, and you need to realize that maybe you don't quite have all the answers right now, and together you can find the answers.
So Melinda, what are some of the next steps from that you recommend from a performance level to business owners? The ones who are fighting, they recognize the challenge, they feel that lack of control. How do they start working with these failures, planning for the wins? What's the performance advice for them right now, as if they were just training?
So in the moment right now, and this is where I'm talking about the win side of things, I recommend that every night your listeners write down 2 or 3 things that went well today. And the reason is because we want to understand that we're building momentum right now, even in these tough times. And even if you can only find one thing that went well, write it down. It's called a win journal. And it will start to gain some momentum and shift the attitude a little bit. So in my book, I talk about these 9 practices that happen in high performance. And in that messy middle period, which is what we're in right now from a business perspective, sometimes it's the absence of those practices that really create the angst that we're going through. And so we have to start building those practices up again. And, that's a longer explanation than, just do a win journal. But I really do recommend that start tonight and write down something that went well today.
When you're thinking about what happens next in this world, and real life pivoting, I mean, you're going through it on a book launch. You had a plan, you prepared for it. It's not going to go the way that you had originally expected, but it gives the opportunity to shift. How long is it going to take for us as humans to get to a place where we're ready to shift? And are you even thinking that far ahead of, when we get to another side of this? Or are you so in the moment because you have all this coaching that you're doing and book launch? Like, where's your mind at around preparedness for the future?
So I'm optimistic that the book will resonate with people because it is a message around an acceptance that we all go through these tough times, and then a pathway to figuring out how to get out of those tough times. So from my perspective, I have to trust that. I have to trust that things will happen in the end for what I intended to have happen. And, quite frankly, this book, it's 7 years in the making. It was a gift back to people because I had such a great experience in sports. And I see with, clients that I have and, in the newspaper and the research I did, I see how hard it is to get out of that high performance, personal best identity and move to figuring out what is next. So, in terms of myself, I think, I have to have trust that the work I did is good and that it will help people. So that's great to have trust, but every single day I'm working on that. Like, I am not giving up I am putting hard work into it every single day. So I'm reaching out to my network. I'm doing interviews such as this. I'm asking people for a favor, which is really tough for me. I'm not the type of person that would constantly call up people and say, I really need a favor from you. But I'm actually asking people for a favor. I'm saying, can you share this book with your network? Can you write a review on Amazon? Because that's how the book world works, is that, it's all built on reviews. And so along with hope for the future and trust that I will use my attributes that I developed over a lifetime, I'm also working really, really hard. And that's what I would say to all of your listeners out there, is that you have to trust that the future will evolve and that we will get back to a new normal. But at the same time, you've got to work your butt off to make it happen.
I think that's right. That may sound simple. I think that's amazing advice, right? So before we started, I told Nick, I think I was in my bedroom the whole weekend on my computer, Saturday, Sunday, and it feels like, and what I appreciate in your advice, Melinda, is, and something my wife tells me also, is I have to have that trust and faith and in what you're saying in terms of that future evolving. And on the other side, what's really powerful is when I asked about your shift, right? When you didn't make it to Australia, you started off with your why, right? And aside from the heartache that many people are going through and the health concerns, which are significant, so I don't minimize it, I also feel like from a personal and business level, at a national level, this is a big reset on why for everyone.
Right.
Right. And so in a warped way, I feel like that's an immense gift. Even at the business level, like, why are we doing this and what our purpose is? And I guess my disconnect was always having that, putting together, I got the hard work part and so many others do, but I guess you just at this moment have to let go and say, I'll do that.
Right.
And I just need to add the faith and confidence that the future will evolve the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that sounds cliche, but I think it's a very powerful thing you're suggesting.
Well, we can't control the future, right? So, the fact is that we have no control other than what we're doing personally, the social distancing, the, limiting shopping, doing all those things that hopefully most people are doing. And that's the only way we can control the future. But we can certainly control the work we're doing in our houses right now to prepare. And for some people, this may be that they don't want to keep working in the same job that they're working in now. And that is a good gut check. If you don't like what you're doing right now, this is your opportunity. This is the universe saying, grab a hold of your future, because there's not going to be many times in your life where you can actually sit back and think about what else do I want to do. And if you love what you're doing, then keep doing it. Like I'm doing all sorts of work right now that I'm not being paid for. And I'm actually, it brings joy to me that I can help people that are really struggling. And, eventually I'll get paid in some way or another. I know that.
And there's tremendous value in probably returning to do good things, and good things will happen to you. And those in business are having to find that, because I think, majority of people in business are probably working harder than they've ever worked before in their careers for less money than they've ever earned in their careers. So it's an imbalance. But if you can find 1 inch of happiness in what you're giving back in that time and the efforts that you're putting in to actually have influence on other human beings, then you'll find values. I think this whole situation is going to, for many people, not all, is going to shift the happiness factor a little bit.
Right.
And the value of money won't just be what goes in your hands, but it's also going to be like how you feel in your heart. Like there's going to be a different type of currency that our world operates on, because we're going to be depleted. Like the financial net worth of many individuals is going to be hurt by this whole process. Therefore, if you cannot take one step to figuring out another type of currency that makes you feel happy in this world, you might feel more lost. Right.
And in fact, the research says after a certain amount, money isn't actually what brings you happiness. So, what is it that brings people happiness? And, I go back to another coaching exercise I have, that is when you have what you call a goosebump moment. So for me, when you were talking there, Nick, I actually had goosebumps around some of the things you were saying, because they resonate so deeply with me. And so, one of the things I challenge individuals to do is to step back and notice those moments where your physical body is giving you a reaction. So it might be tears welling, at a wedding, it's tears welling up in your eyes. At a funeral, it might be, gratefulness, for feeling grateful that you had a chance to actually have this person in your life. So what are those moments that really, really bring you joy? And figure out underneath those moments what they mean. So for example, for me, I love helping people that are underdogs. I love watching people achieve things that people said they would never achieve. And in my coaching, that's definitely a part of my coaching, is to take on those clients that, have lost the confidence in themselves and need to rebuild it. Or, if I'm thinking about how I can add value to the world, to help those, especially in this book. Like, I wrote this book to help people figure out this messy middle, to realize they're not alone in the messy middle, and that other people experience messy middles. In fact, most of us experience messy middles, and you too can come out of that. So those are the things that bring me joy. So I would challenge everyone to figure out what actually brings you joy, and then start doing more of that.
What's interesting, Melinda, is like, you're offering that advice, but spending this time with us and doing what you're doing right now is just demonstrating it, right? So those aren't words. I mean, the way you're connecting and on a personal level, again, this is the first time we're speaking. I could tell you, if that's your goal on a personal level, I certainly appreciate the connection and the gift you're giving us this morning. I have to tell you, and getting to how the universe works, it is weird because we've done well, and as a team, we've even had meetings over the weekend, but today was sort of a low moment where I'm sort of getting off track.
Yeah.
And I feel like the universe put this conversation in my lap. So on a personal level, I have to thank you. But in terms of your advice, talk about the power of what you're saying, because you're actually doing it. And I know that purpose and that why is reaching out to other people. So on a personal level, totally, and you talk about gifts, right? So Nick and I we're a franchise law firm. And as this unfolded, our biggest why at the moment was, how do we put what Nick will call scaffolding around our clients and a community?
Right.
Ironically, it's turned out to be the biggest gift. And while I hope at the end of the day, we've put that scaffolding around them, I've also known, ironically, I've given myself an amazing gift, which has been an amazing community and amazing conversations. And so, every once in a while I do pause and say, all the craziness is happening, but I do get those glimmers of the future is unfolding however it's meant to be. And so for me, I mean, just conceptually, your confidence in your thought process is very inspiring. So I personally very much appreciate that.
Thank you very much. And, I love what you just said. If I can just reflect back, that something that I just heard is, this importance to connect with other people, and how much that is a value of yours. And, as we lived through the last, bull market, let's call it, we get so wrapped up in our day-to-day to-do lists. What do I have to get accomplished today? What's on that list? What's important? How can I make money? How can I keep going? How can I expand? And what you just did is just took a step back from that, and you really realized what was more important. It's not that it's not important, but what was more important in what you said was that connection to people. And wow, that means a lot to me.
Well, yeah, no, Melinda, as a human, I appreciate that connection. And I could promise you this, it's the ripple effect. Like, thankfully too, my sons watch these conversations at night.
Yeah.
It blows me away also. So, no, but you should know, at least on a human level, you're making a big impact. And I appreciate that very much this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your words.
I think it's interesting to think back to your career, Melinda, because even when you were saying that, what your drive was, it was the team, and you were in such an individualized sport that really you were craving that human connection more than the sport could give you. So it's probably interesting to reflect back on your career and see where it's gone, because you had purpose to connect with humans. The sport that you were in, you loved the team aspect, which probably happened outside of the pool for the most part. it's fascinating to me, and I appreciate this conversation too. And obviously, we wish you the best of luck on your book. And I put up your URL on our screen. I'll do it again, just in case you want to go find it. I assume it's on Amazon as well.
It is. Amazon and Barnes & Noble right now. Those are the two major ones.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, and it was our privilege connecting with you. Thanks for giving us some of your time.
Well, thank you for having me, and good luck to you guys. Cheering you on. I really am. I feel like I got a new friend out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks. You too. Bye.